Okay, everyone. Are you ready for more? Yeah?
Yes, please.
Are you sure? Amazing. It's been a long day. Did many of you come to the funeral this morning? Yeah? So you kind of, well, one thing after the other, just carrying on. So you have to kind of be sustained. See what happens. Okay, thank you. I'm just getting late in the day, so I'm kind of leaning back more, so getting more and more lazy. It's a nice chair. I have to use the chair properly here.
Ajahn Brahmali.
Yeah, please.
Ajahn Brahm saw us use that chair, and he was like, how come there's such a comfortable chair? And then he also tested us. Yeah. He said, so you guys are doing the workshop on Satipatana. Yeah. Tell me what did he say? Prerequisites of Satipatana.
Okay. Testing you out, okay, good.
And then I said, if we don't answer correctly, blame the teacher. But he told me, he said, cannot blame the teacher, otherwise he has to do the teaching himself.
I see, okay. Okay, yeah. Well, maybe that's the case. Maybe that'd be good news, isn't it? If he can do all the teachings. We already had talked about the prerequisites, actually. So the timing was perfect. It was just really good. Okay. Anyway, let's carry on. So we had a look at the kind of basic ideas around Satipatthana, some of the ways that it is talked about in the sutras in a general sense. And now I want to get more into the meaning of this term, how it is used in the sutta specifically, and also the meaning of the word Satipatthana itself. That's the first thing I want to look at. So, okay. You can even closer. Okay. Oh, no, that's okay. Yeah, I'm just being lazy. I'm just sitting back and really kind of relaxing. So, yeah, good. As long as there's room for the coffee, it's all right. So we're going to look at the meaning of the word Satipatthana, what it actually refers to. And this word is a compound, very common in Pali language to compound words. You put it into, merge the words together, so they kind of become compounded. And sometimes in Pali you can get these enormous words, like in the book, for example, it doesn't fit on the width of the page. The word goes the whole width and it kind of continues on the second line. That's kind of the words in Pali. They can be incredibly long because they are compounded. In fact, in traditional way that the sutras are written. If you see them, for example, you can see them in Sinhala characters in Sri Lanka, you can see them in Burmese characters in Burma, in Thai characters. Now you also find them in Roman characters, of course. But the traditional way of writing them is just no gaps at all. There is no words, just a continuous flow. Yeah? And that's kind of hard to read. If you're used to being divided up, it's quite hard to read, actually, a traditional text in the Pali, because it is just one continuous block of words, basically. So compounding, very, very common in Pali, and Satipatthana is no exemption to that. So it is made up of two words. The first word is sati, yeah? And I'm going to discuss the meaning of sati shortly. But before that, I want to discuss the second part of this word, which looks like patana, yeah? Sati plus patana. But not necessarily sati plus patana, because the way compounding of words work, sometimes vowels kind of disappear in the compounding here. So there's two possibilities. It can be sati plus patana, or it can be sati plus upatana. Yeah, the meaning is very close, but a slightly different meaning between the two. So the first thing we have to decide on is it patana or upatana? Exciting, right? This is really getting into the nitty-gritty of Pali here. So if you don't get excited by this, then I don't know what to say then. But it's interesting, because these kind of little nuances sometimes, they can bring out the meaning of these words in a kind of more deeper way. So it's kind of useful to look at this. So the first thing, Satipatthana, is it sati plus patana, or is it sati plus upatana? And the first of these versions, patana means more like it's like a place, yeah? Patana is like the word tana is like sthana in Sanskrit. So Afghanistan, in the present day, Pakistan, Hindustan, is the same ending as the ending you have here, stana. Tana means like place. So in other words, it's the placing of the mindfulness is where the mindfulness goes. It has to do with the object, the thing that you are observing here. Patana. Or it can mean upatana. Upatana is different because upatana is itself a kind of compounded word. It is the prefix upa plus the word tana. So it's tana, and upa means like near or towards or something like that. So it's like placing, place towards, placing near is the meaning of that. So one is the object, whereas the other one has something like the placing near. And this gives a slightly different meaning when you translate it into English. So how do we decide which one is correct? And this, I will give you an example of how to decide these kind of issues when you do translations of the sutras or the Pali. And the best way to decide on translations, deciding on the meaning of such words, is always to see if there is any evidence in the sutras. If there's evidence in the sutras, that is always the primary way of deciding, because the sutras come from the same time period. Because they come from the same time period, they will tend to use the words in the same way. If you go to the commentaries, then sometimes you find words used in a slightly different way, because the commentaries were written at a different time. When they're written at a different time, words are often used in a slightly different way. So Patana here is the preferred understanding of the commentaries. So the question then is does that agree with the sutras? And what the sutras have to say, the preferred meaning in the sutras is upatana. And I will give you an example of that. This is straight from the Majimanika 118. This is the Anapana Sati Sutra, the Sutra on the mindfulness of breathing. And this is the standard formulation for how you do mindfulness of breathing. Parimukkang satting upatapetva. And that satting there, of course, is mindfulness. Upatapetva is the same word as upatana that you see above. It is just one is a verb, another one is a noun. That's why it has a slightly different ending here. But actually it's the same word. And parimukkang, that's just an additional word, which means like, in the present or in front of you or something like that. So based on that evidence, I would say the meaning must be upatana is the correct meaning. And if you look at the modern scholarship, people like Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi or any other, Bhante Sujato or myself for that matter, or I think Ajahn Brahm would probably say the same thing, that upatana is the appropriate interpretation, because that is how the sutras deal with this word. And this has a very interesting consequence. You may know that Satipatana is sometimes translated as the foundations of mindfulness. You talk about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And that translation is based on Sati plus Patana. That is what that translation is based on. And but if you think about it, if you talk about the foundations of mindfulness, what that means, it means that it is the basis on which you create mindfulness. A foundation of mindfulness is the thing which gives rise to mindfulness. But the point of Satipatana, which I made before, is not that we give rise to mindfulness. The point of Satipatana is how we use mindfulness to take the meditation deeper. We saw the formula for Satipatana. It says that you are keen, aware, and mindful. So mindfulness is a quality that you bring into Satipatana meditation, and then you use that to develop the mind into samadhi. That's the whole point of it. Satipatana is the using of mindfulness to achieve samadhi. That's the purpose of it. So for that reason, the idea, the translation foundations of mindfulness is misleading, because that gives the idea that we are developing mindfulness through Satipatana. No, we're not developing mindfulness. What we are developing is stillness, samadhi. That is the purpose of Satipatana. So for that reason, upatana is foundations? No. Foundations doesn't work. So we kind of cross that out. Instead, what it means is the following. Standing near, establishing, application, and focusing. These are the kind of things that it amounts to. Standing near, upatana, almost a very literal translation of upatana. And when you stand near something, the idea here is that you, for example, if you are an attendant to somebody in the monastic community, we have the upataks. Yeah, we have one over there, and we have. And the upatak is someone who attends on you, right? So that's like the attending with mindfulness. It's almost literally what it means. You're attending with mindfulness. You're standing near, attending with mindfulness. And attending with mindfulness is like application of mindfulness, focusing with mindfulness, establishing of mindfulness. All of these things are very closely related to each other. And the difference is that when you talk about, for example, establishing mindfulness or application of mindfulness, you're not just talking about the object or what you're focusing on, but you're also talking about the quality of mind that you're bringing to that focusing. There's two things. There is the object, but there's also the quality of the mind. So Satipatthana is a particular quality of mind that you bring to the meditation practice. And this is why we have this whole sequence of 6 factors before we get to Sammasati. All the 6 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path that come before that, they have to do with developing the right quality of mind that you bring to bear on that meditation practice. Once the quality of mind is in place, then you can do the mindfulness of the breathing or whatever it is, and then the meditation is going to work. So you are establishing the mindfulness in a certain way for a certain object. You are applying the mindfulness in a certain way. You are focusing the mind. Focusing is a translation I've seen Ajahn Brahmali using. Establishing is a translation used by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi in his translations. Application is a translation that I have been using here and now. I've been using this translation. Why have I been using it? Because I want to be different. That's why I'm using this translation. Other people are using establishing, focusing. You got to have, you just got to take a stand sometimes and kind of do things differently. Simply, the point is that there isn't any one right translation. There's different nuances, different ways of thinking about it, and that's why I bring all of these different possibilities in here. So that is upatana, establishing, application, standing near, focusing. So once we have done that, we need to continue. The next thing we have to do is to look at, so here again, foundations of mindfulness is out. That's what I Buddhist was saying. It doesn't really work. So instead we have the establishings of mindfulness, or the applications of mindfulness, or the focuses of mindfulness. This is really a far preferable translation. And it's interesting when you read, for example, the translations of someone like Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, you will see that he has changed his vocabulary over time. So if you read his translation of the Majimanika, the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, he uses the foundations of mindfulness. Then when you come to the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha, now he uses the establishings of mindfulness. So, and this is kind of fascinating because you can see that you develop over time as you get a deeper understanding of what is going on. You change the way you translate, and there is and this is the problem of translation. There isn't any final translation that is absolutely correct. It is always like an evolution, a changing, a movement, hopefully in the right direction, but there is a movement forward, and so there is no absolute final truth in these matters. There's a continual discussion here. So that is the upatana part. Now I want to look at the sati part. What does sati actually mean here? And this is probably more interesting than upatana. So let's now look at sati. The meaning of sati. And the first meaning of sati is the following, memory. And this is not how we normally think about sati. In Pali, normally we think of sati as being awareness. You bring sati to the meditation, it means that you are aware of what is going on. But actually the root meaning of the word sati is really memory. And if you look at scriptures that are more ancient than the Buddhist scriptures, you look at the ancient Brahmanical scriptures, this is how sati is used in those ancient, before the Buddha. Memory is what it actually means. And because it means that in like the cultural context of Buddhism, it is also very likely to mean that in Buddhism as well. So we should expect it to mean memory in the suttas. And lo and behold, this is what you find. This is one of the definitions of sati you find in the suttas. Furthermore, a person is mindful. Satima means mindful here. They have utmost mindfulness, sati, and alertness, nipakka, and can remember and recall what was said and done long ago. It is very clearly that this refers to memory. The definition is very clear. It doesn't really lead me, there's not much ambiguity at all in this particular definition. So it refers to memory. And this is important to know, because once we understand that it refers to memory, it brings an added meaning to the idea of sati. If we just think of it as awareness or alertness or whatever, then it is limited. But if we also remember that it means memory, that's interesting, okay. Then it adds an extra dimension to the idea of sati. And we will see in a second why this actually matters. Now, in certain contexts in the suttas, sati means actually memory. You may, we all know about the Anuseties. Anusati. Anuseties are the recollections that we do, recollections of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, recollection of chaga, generosity, recollection of your sila, your virtue, or morality, recollection of the devas, or the devatas. I really like that recollection of the devatas. It's a really cool one. It's not one you hear much about, but it's an interesting one. And so these are recollections, because there you actually are remembering the qualities of the Buddha. You're reminding yourself of these things. So in that context, anusati, it means very clearly memory. So there are places in the suttas where even meditation practice is done through an act of memory or an act of recollection. You can see the word there, anusati. It says there anusarita. And this is directly related to the anusati. This is just a verbal form, a past participle it's called, whereas anusati is a noun form of the same word. So this is the first aspect of sati. Then let's have a look at the second aspect. And not very surprising, it means awareness. And I will give you an example of a context where it means awareness. There are some people who argue that the sati can be fully explained by the idea of memory. Memory is all that it means. But actually, it's also clear that it must mean awareness as well. And this is the context where it is fairly obvious. When they have ill will in them, they understand, I have ill will in me. When they don't have ill will in them, they understand, I don't have ill will in me. So this is a part of the Satipatthana Sutta, and this is the Satipatthana on the Pancha Nivarana, the 5 hindrances. And here, obviously, this has nothing to do with recollection or memory. This has to do with being aware of what is going on. You know that you have ill will, you know you have desire, you know you have tiredness and lethargy and these kind of things. And that knowledge is an awareness of what is happening in the present. It's nothing really to do with memory, or not much to do with memory. So I think this is fairly clear from the context here. So we have 2 ideas then of that come together, which form the idea of sati. And to fully understand sati, we have to bring these things together. Sati is memory plus awareness. And the way to one way to think about this is that to be able to memorize things well, you need strong awareness. Yeah? So if you, for example, if you do an act of kindness, if you are very aware when you do an act of kindness, it is much easier to remember it later on. Yeah? So the strong awareness at the time when you do an act makes it easier to recall it later. So awareness aids memory. Strong awareness leads to good memory. And this is why when we do acts of kindness, when we are generous, when we do anything good in this world, we should try to do it with awareness. Because by being aware of what we're doing, we are creating much more powerful karma. It's more powerful because we are making it much easier to recall it later on. And that's a very important part of the idea of karma, is the chaganusati, silanusati, the ability to recall it later. So be aware, be clear about what you're doing, have firm intentions about what you're doing. Yeah, not in a greedy sense, I'm going to get much out of this, not in that way, but just to kind of be clear about what is happening at that time. So awareness is both important when you do the act, and also later on if you want to recall it, if you want to remember something you've done in the past, the clearer your awareness is, the more easy it is to remember what you did in the past. So both at the time when you do the action and at the time when you recall it, awareness is very important. But it also goes the other way around, yeah? So, and this is the second part of this. Awareness itself includes memory of what we are supposed to be doing. So memory requires awareness, yeah? But awareness also requires memory. Goes both ways. And the reason for that is because if you are going to, let's say, be aware of the breath, yeah? Awareness itself is not enough, but you have to remember what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah, I'm supposed to be watching the breath, right? If you don't remember that, you're going to be all over the place before you know it. So watching the breath, awareness is not enough. You have to know why you are doing it. You have to know what, you have to have a kind of, it's almost like an imprinted memory in your mind that you carry with you that reminds you of what is going on. So memory and awareness, you have to bring memory into the awareness so that you know and you can keep track of what is happening at any particular time. So in both cases, these things go together. Awareness and memory cannot really be separated out. And now it's starting to make sense, yeah? It's starting to make sense why it is that sati, which originally meant memory, how it develops into awareness. And the reason is because actually the two are very closely linked to each other. And it's interesting when you start to read some of the sutras, you start to look at some of the definitions in the sutras. For example, you find the definition of the sati, sat-indriya. Indriya is the faculty, spiritual faculty, sati being mindfulness. The definition of the sat-indriya varies between memory, as we saw before, and ordinary satipatana, as we saw afterwards. Yeah, the two kind of, it has both at the same time. And it shows you how these things kind of go together. Yeah, there's no difference. Having good memory and practicing Satipatana are alternative definitions of the Sat-indriya. So in other words, there are just different ways of looking at the same thing: good memory and Satipatana. So then we have the definition of Satipatana. You can define it as follows: the application of awareness and memory to 4 different areas. That's why we have 4 Satipatanas. And this is what we translate as mindfulness into English. Why do we use the word mindfulness? For the following reason: because it is a suitably vague word to cover both these areas. In other words, no one really knows what mindfulness means, so we just whack it in there and we use that. It's kind of suitable. It's a little bit like that, right? It's strange, because the reason why we use the word mindfulness in the present day is because this was a word that was taken by one of the early pioneers, the English pioneers in translations of the sutras. Thomas William Rhys Davies was an English, he's actually a Welshman. I have to be careful what I say. We have people with a Welsh heritage in the audience here. So, and he was a very good scholar of Buddhism. Even though he was very early, he was very intelligent and very not only intelligent but wise in the understanding of the sutras. And he basically became a Buddhist, and that was very radical at that time because he was working starting in the 1870s. Yeah, you can imagine in the 1870s. To kind of consider yourself a Buddhist is pretty radical. This was conservative England, or conservative Wales, I should say. But that kind of society, Victorian society, it was not easy to kind of stand out like that and to be a Buddhist. He never called himself a Buddhist. He just said that the Buddhist sutras are far superior to the Bible, he said, because the teachings are much, much better. That's one of the things he said about it. So he is the one who found this word. He's the one who decided to translate sati as mindfulness. And once he had chosen this word, we have been stuck with this word ever since. That's how it happens. And if you think about the word mindful, yeah, you may say to someone, please be mindful of this. Yeah, be mindful of, be mindful of the traffic outside. And if you think about what that means, be mindful of the traffic, it means be careful, yeah, be aware. And it also means like remember the traffic. So actually, when you look at the way that word is used in English, even though it is vague and a kind of bit unclear, it kind of corresponds fairly well, yeah, to this dual idea of awareness and memory coming together. So I think it is not a bad translation. The only problem with mindfulness is that most people find it a bit blurry what it actually means. But I think once you think about it, actually it is a fairly decent translation of the word sati. So that's what it's called, mindfulness. So, okay, let's stop there. Sorry about this. Let's just do a few minutes of meditation together just to relax a little bit. Okay, so any questions or comments, or anyone would like to say anything about what we have just covered, or anything else on Satipatthana?
Ajahn, there are
Yeah.
3 questions from online.
Okay.
The first one, I'm not sure if I understand. Under the spreading chestnut tree, I sold you and you sold me. What does it mean?
Under the spreading chestnut tree. What was the rest?
Yeah. I sold you and you sold me. What does it mean?
That's a good question. You have to ask the author, I think. Yeah. I have no idea. Is that supposed to be a Buddhist saying? Sorry, I don't know what you are referring to, so you can't answer that one.
Yeah, so that was the question from Emlan Wasista. So maybe ask the question again to make it clearer for us.
Yeah.
Next one, Rick Thorne from Indiana, USA. How do we skillfully maintain faith, confidence, and resolve while being offered different interpretations of Satipatthana without clinging to fixed views?
Well, what you have to do is that you have to, this is the point about this course on early Buddhism, is that we really need to go back to the suttas, to the word of the Buddha, to decide what is appropriate, what is the real Buddhist teaching is, because it all came from the Buddha ultimately, and any kind of Buddhism only has meaning insofar as it is based on the teaching of the Buddha. Everything is based on the teaching of the Buddha. Without the teaching of the Buddha, everything collapses. So the teaching of the Buddha is the foundation stone that we have to base everything else on. So just ask yourself whether things are in accordance with the suttas or not. And that is really the kind of the end point of that search. And still, even then, it is difficult enough, because even then there will be differences. And ultimately, you just have to kind of rely on your own resources to decide where you think the truth lies, by reading the suttas a little bit, by listening to different interpretations, and by using your wisdom to the best of your ability. That's really the only way to do it. And then gradually, this is kind of the nice things about reading the suttas and understanding the complete picture. After a while, you get a feeling of the complete picture, how it all kind of fits together. And then the confidence becomes quite strong that you understand what is going on.
Okay, and I've got a third question here from USA, Sanket Kaneka. I am dealing... Maybe someone is calling with a question, Ajahn. Okay, the question is, actually it's not a question, it's a statement. I am dealing with health anxiety disorder. Fear of dying is one of the thoughts that is causing anxiety, physical symptoms, and also disabling the ability to lead a normal life. But there's no question. Maybe how to deal with that?
How to do? Okay. I'm a little bit concerned about being taken too far away from the subject that we're dealing with here, because these are kind of very general questions about how to deal with things. But in brief, anxiety comes from having a negative view about the future, being fearful about the future. And always remember that if you live a good life, if you follow Buddhist ideas or any ideas of a good life, doesn't have to be Buddhist, any kind of ideas of a good life, where you live with kindness, you live with morality or whatever, your future is always going to be good. The future we're building from kindness and goodness. And any person who lives well does not really have to fear the future. So focus on that. Focus that you are laying down the right causes for the future, and then you will hopefully gradually come out of that anxiety, and then start to see the potential for the future as you do that. But please try to keep the questions that are roughly about Satipatthana, otherwise we might end up being here a long time. Okay, yeah. Yeah, please.
Is it working?
Yes, okay.
Ajahn Brahm uses for sati, don't just say sati, sati sampajana.
Yeah.
That is, could you explain that please?
Sati sampajanya, yeah. So sati sampajanya is, the word sati is used in different ways in the suttas. And it is used Sati Sampajanya and used Satipatana. And these are two slightly different areas. I'm actually coming to that in a second. It's just coming up. So just hold on a little bit, we'll go. And then if I don't answer your question properly, come back later on here. Yeah. Yes, please.
When I think of mindfulness in the meditation, generally, but in life, we are mindful. So I've read somewhere in life, I think it's a Buddhist philosophy, that sometimes you can stop yourself even before you're aware of your feelings or what action you're going to do, and stop yourself. You can stop yourself in the middle of doing it, and then you can think about it afterwards and then say not to do something with ill will, let's say.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find out whether this mindfulness is something like contemplation, whether you could revise your old feelings and be mindful of those, not in that moment but afterwards.
So like contemplating the past, you mean, and kind of revising your ideas about it? Is that what you mean? Or?
Yeah, so you're mindful that you had ill feeling or desire at that time, and that's why you don't catch yourself in the moment because you're not that mindful in the moment.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, when you go, you feel bad and you have a feeling in your body, let's say, why am I feeling bad? Because I wasn't ideal.
Okay, yeah. Sure, yeah, no, absolutely. The thing is that, and this is one of the things I want to talk about next, is that mindfulness is used in the sutras in kind of many different levels. And the level that you're talking about there is more like what I would call the level of sense restraint, whereby you try to be aware of your, when you go wrong and when you make a mistake, and you ideally want to change that conduct, and you kind of direct the mind in a new direction as a consequence. And that comes really, in my opinion, under sense restraint. It is a kind of prior to meditation practice. So these are kind of different levels, if you like. Let's talk about this now and see if that answers your question as we go through this. Basically, you're right about what you're saying here. So you can use it in that way. But let's have a quick look at the different degrees of mindfulness in the sutras. And one of the things that you find, and one of the obvious things, is that you always need sati to do anything to some extent. If you're going to be kind, if you're going to avoid doing something wrong or saying something wrong, you have to have sati at the time of action. You have to be aware of what you're doing. If you have no awareness, you're just going to do whatever comes automatically. You're going to be running as a robot. You're going to be running on habit. But any degree of awareness of what you're doing, that also is sati. So sati comes in many different levels. That's kind of the point here. So the first level is this one. Mindfully, you give up wrong speech and take up right speech. This is the idea that even when we do an act by body or by speech, you need mindfulness to direct yourself in the right way. It's a very basic sati, not a very strong sati, but sati nonetheless. Same thing with wrong action. You have to have mindfulness to give up wrong action and take up right action. Without that awareness of what is going on, there's no way you're going to be able to change your habits. So this is a basic level of sati. This particular extract is found in Majimanika 117, the Great 40, and you can look it up yourself if you'd like to see it. So this is one way of thinking about sati. Then there's another way, and this is the way that Prem was talking about just a minute ago. So here we have mindfulness and full awareness. This is sati sampajanya. Full awareness here is translation of sampajanya. And this is taken from a sutta which shows you, again, it is a causal sequence, one thing leading to the next one. It actually starts off much earlier. It starts off by hearing the teaching of the Buddha, and then going stage by stage. And at a certain point, it comes to mindfulness and full awareness. And then that leads on to sense restraint, which then leads on to the three kinds of good conduct. To be able to conduct yourself properly in all ways, including with the mind, you need that sense restraint. And then finally, that leads to the four applications of mindfulness. So what you can see here, Prem, is that here you see mindfulness in two different ways, but you can see that mindfulness and sati sampajanya, mindfulness and full awareness, is more preliminary compared to the Satipatthana. Yeah? You see here how one comes after the other one. So that is a more preliminary aspect of the path, Sati Sampajanya. Sati Sampajanya is what you use in daily life to remind yourself of how you should live, what you should be doing to guide yourself in the right direction. In the sutras, it typically talks about, it usually talks about the monastic life. It talks about going into the village with Sati Sampajanya. Yeah, so you go into the village. Why? We go into the village to receive alms, food, or something like that. You don't go into the village to look at the pretty girls or whatever. You are clear about why you're going into the village. And the same thing with talking. You're clear about why you are talking. Yeah, you don't talk frivolously. You talk in the right way. The Sampajanya is what guides you to know whether you're doing the right thing at any particular time. And this is a prerequisite to Satipatthana. Yeah. So this is kind of the distinction here. So mindfulness is required all the way. You require mindfulness to be able to act and speak in the right way. Then you require mindfulness together with Sampajanya as a general guide in your life. This is part of right effort, usually, on the path. And then that leads on to Satipatthana, which is then the application of mindfulness in meditation. Yeah? So it's like levels, and it comes all the way through the thing here. And Sati Sampajanya, it's more complicated than that actually, because Sampajanya is also found in the Satipatthana formula. Yeah? So when the Satipatthana formula, it says that you practice, you observe the body, an aspect of the body, and you do that satima atapi sampajano. Yeah? So you also have Sampajanya while you're practicing Satipatthana. Yeah, so you have to, in other words, you have to know what you're doing while you do the Satipatthana practice, but it starts before that. The more preliminary idea, the way Sati Sampajanya is normally defined in the sutras, is as a preliminary practice, and then it carries on into your meditation as well. Yeah. So the idea here is just to show you that words like sati is very, very broad, and it is really required on the entire path, yeah, everywhere. And this is true of a lot of the words and terminology in the sutras. Yeah, they are general words in Indian society that is used in a very broad context, like wisdom, for example. Wisdom can be ordinary wisdom of an ordinary person, to be kind rather than to be nasty, or it can be the higher wisdom of the arahant and everything in between. The same thing with faith, yeah? The same thing with sati, the same thing with words like yoniso manasikara, for example, same thing with sampajanya. All of these words have a very, very broad range of meanings. But, and this is kind of the critical thing, is that in the sutras, they tend to be used in one particular way. One particular way is more important than the other ways. And in the sutras, the most important way that sati is used is in connection with Satipatthana practice. In connection with mindfulness of breathing and meditation practice. That is the way. This is kind of the most significant usage of sati in the sutras. So, degrees of mindfulness. Satipatthana is the most prominent kind of mindfulness in the sutras. That's where it comes into its own. Yeah, this is where mindfulness comes into its own and becomes fully established. Prior to this, sati is still quite weak. It comes and goes. Sometimes you know what you're doing, sometimes you haven't got a clue what you're doing. And then at a certain point, it becomes strong enough that it becomes like a force in your life, something which guides you all the time and kind of enables you to feel in charge of your life. And this is one of the beautiful things about sati, is that it's called sati adipateya in the sutras. Adipateya means something like rulership or lordship. You are, in other words, you rule yourself through sati. Yeah, sati becomes like the ruler in your life. It enables you to live the way you want to live, because you're always guided by sati. And this is kind of one of the powers of sati. But to do that, it has to be firmly established. And this is what happens at the level of Satipatthana. So there's all these degrees, and sati, but the real sati happens at Satipatthana. That's what I'm trying to say. This is where it really comes into its own. That's where it gets its real Buddhist meaning from, is in this particular context. Am I making any sense? Yeah? Okay. I'm glad to hear that. And then, of course, it goes further. Yeah? Sati doesn't stop with Satipatthana. Then it develops further and becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. We'll talk more about this later on, all the way to arahantship, when it kind of reaches its pinnacle of strength. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So this is the characteristics of sati in Satipatthana. So people often ask, how do I know that I'm mindful enough when I practice meditation? So what are some of these characteristics of Satipatthana in the sutras? So one of the main things about Satipatthana practice, we shall have a look at this a little bit more detail later on, is that the coarse defilements of the mind have already been abandoned. And the coarsest defilements of the mind are ill will and sensory desire. These are the two main things that kind of obstruct the mind from being mindful. And so these, first of all, you have to free yourself from these, and that is when Satipatthana happens. So when you free yourself from these main defilements, what does that feel like? How do you experience that? Well, first of all, it means that you tend to be present. And the reason why you are present is because ill will and desire are the things that take the mind out of the present. If you have ill will, you tend to think about someone in the past. If you have desire, you're thinking about the future. This is kind of the nature of these defilements. So by giving up those defilements, the mind tends to be present instead. Now you will notice I have not used the word present moment. I've just used the word present. And the reason for that is because this idea of moment is not a very satisfactory word in Buddhism. You are either present or you are not present, but moment doesn't really come into this. If you are present, it doesn't have a feeling of moment, right? If you're present, it has this feeling of almost eternity about it. You are here, and you could carry on like this forever. There isn't really any moment. The idea of moment is a later development in Buddhism that comes specifically with the Abhidhamma, because the Abhidhamma is an analysis or a philosophy that likes to divide reality up into all kinds of bits and pieces. This is the purpose of the Abhidhamma Pitaka, is to divide the world up into chunks so we can try to understand it. And one of the important innovations in the Abhidhamma is the idea of momentariness, how one thing happens momentarily after the other. But the sutras don't use that kind of language. The sutras just talks about pachupanna dhamma, present things. It doesn't talk about momentariness in that way. So for that reason I left it out, because presence is really sufficient to understand the idea of sati. You are present, you are here, you know what is going on here. You're not kind of fantasizing about the future or reflecting on the past, anything like that. This is one of the most important qualities of that sati, that you are here and now. That is what enables you to stay with the object of meditation. It is stable. You're not kind of losing your mindfulness all the time. You're not losing your presence. You're not kind of going into the past and future. If your ill will and desire have been abandoned quite thoroughly, it means there's a certain stability here. And that stability is what enables you to stay with the object. It's the beginning of samadhi. Samadhi is stability of the mind, staying with the same thing all the time, not kind of the mind being all over the place. So this shows you again why it is that sati leads to samadhi, because that stability, the ability to stay with the object of meditation. So it drives you towards samadhi. There is a degree of clarity about what is going on. The mind feels quite clear. You know what is happening. And you're not kind of drowsy or restless or fuzzy or all over the place, but you actually know what is going on with a degree of clarity. And this idea of clarity is actually very closely related to the idea of vipassana. Very often we translate vipassana as insight in Buddhist circles, But I will argue next time when we talk, not the time after that, when we talk about samatha and vipassana, I will argue that insight is not entirely satisfactory as a translation of vipassana. And the reason is because vipassana leads to wisdom, but insight itself actually just is an aspect of wisdom. So we are basically, when we use insight, we really mean panya. Panya should be translated as insight or wisdom, but vipassana is really prior to that. Vipassana is that which leads to panya down the track. So vipassana is probably better translated as clear seeing. Yeah, you're seeing clearly. Your mind is clear. You can see what is going on, and that then, as you do that, ultimately gives rise to wisdom and insight. So this clarity, very closely related to vipassana. And then the last one is the fact that Satipatana, the Sati, is peaceful. Yeah, you have a feeling of being at ease when you have Sati. There's a sense of peace, because having the future and the past in your mind all the time, this leads to all this confusion inside. It leads to your mind being all over the place. But once you are fully in the present, there's a degree of peacefulness about that. Where the mind is at ease, the mind is much more relaxed. It is not so driven back and forth by these defilements of the mind. And of course, that peacefulness is samatha. Yeah, it's the calming of the mind. Yeah, the mind is kind of feeling a sense of calm and peacefulness about it. So here you can see the qualities of Satipatana. Yeah, samatha and vipassana are kind of part of this. And you can see the stability which has to do with moving towards samadhi and the present, being present, what is happening now. So all of these things are dealing to some way with these dual aspects of samatha and vipassana, which are so important for meditation practice. And we're going to talk about this much more later on. Okay, so this gives you also some idea of how to recognize sati. When you meditate, you have some idea whether you are ready or not for the meditation practice, whether these qualities are established in your mind or not. This is how you know whether you're ready to watch the breath or to do almost any kind of meditation, really. Okay, let's move on. So now we come to the really interesting thing I was talking about. Actually, all of this is interesting, but this is also interesting. So the place of Satipatthana on the path, how it kind of integrates into everything. How, and this will tell us how we're supposed to understand it. Once we understand how it integrates with other factors, it helps us to understand what this really is all about. So a very important part of this. So I think I know what's coming next. So we have these three. We talked about this before. From right effort comes right mindfulness. So right mindfulness is Satipatthana, and from right mindfulness comes right stillness. Satipatthana is squeezed between right effort and right stillness. And as I mentioned before, this is actually very interesting and very important. From right effort comes right mindfulness. Right effort is the cause of right mindfulness. It is the condition which makes right mindfulness possible. Right mindfulness, in turn, is the condition which allows right samadhi, samma samadhi, or right stillness to happen. And this has some very important implication, as I mentioned before, because it shows you what it is that you need to do. If your mindfulness is weak, it tells you exactly what you have to do to establish that mindfulness. And you will notice it does not say that it is mindfulness that leads to more mindfulness. This is not like a muscle that you can train. If you train a lot, you become more mindful. Maybe a little bit like that, but that is not really the main message of the suttas, that by being mindful, you become more mindful in the future. The message of the suttas is that if you want to train your mindfulness, it is the right effort. And the right effort is always about using your mind in the right way, using your mind to reduce the defilements, using your mind to increase the good qualities. How can I be more kind? How can I have more compassion for people? How can I have more metta? how can I have more understanding? Yeah, how can I be less just always get upset with things easily because there's so many things happening in our life. That is really the, if you like, the path, to establishing mindfulness. And you can see why. I just said before that we need to reduce the ill will and the desire. Ill will and desire are the main defilements. So if you practice compassion, if you practice metta and kindness, then clearly you're overcoming desire and ill will. You're moving towards contentment and kindness instead. That is the way to establish mindfulness, because these are the enemies of mindfulness. If you just try to be mindful, then it may not have so much impact on your ill will and desires, because you're just trying. The underlying problem is still there. To really overcome ill will and desire, you have to use things like reflections. You have to apply yourself in daily life in the right way to overcome these qualities. When you get angry, you have to say, why am I getting upset? And then you kind of turn, you look at this person in a different way, and that, looking at the person in a different way, seeing them with eyes of kindness, with metta, and these things instead, that is what allows you to overcome the ill will. The Buddha, very interesting, says, there's a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya where the Buddha says specifically, you cannot overcome ill will by mindfulness. Ill will has to be overcome by metta. So you have to apply the metta, see the good qualities in that person, then you can overcome the ill will. Mindfulness is required just to remind you that something wrong is happening here, but it's not enough in its own right. So right effort, dealing with the mind in the right way, this is the critical thing here. And this is so interesting, because it is so interesting because it changes a lot in the way we tend to think about Satipatthana. We tend to think about Satipatthana, as I mentioned before, being mindful in daily life. Be mindful, be mindful. Okay, be mindful, but why should you be mindful? That's the kind of the critical thing. It is not just enough just to be mindful in its own right. It has to have a larger purpose, and the larger purpose is right effort, the overcoming of the negative qualities of the mind. That is what it's really about. But just being mindful in its own sake is not going to progress you all that much, because that is not the cause of mindfulness. The cause is the overcoming of these defilements. So very interesting. And I will show you in a second how this works with a more practical example. And then you have the idea that mindfulness leads to stillness. And as I mentioned before, this is also a very interesting idea. Normally we think about mindfulness leading to vipassana, or being equivalent to vipassana, leading to insight and wisdom. And ultimately it does. But in the sutras it is always, as we have seen, it is mindfulness leading to stillness. Again and again and again, what we find in the sutras. We'll look more about this in a second. And again, very fascinating, because it is so the opposite how we normally think about Satipatthana. We think about insight and wisdom, not about stillness. So what does this mean then? And I kind of talked about this very briefly before. I asked the question, does this mean that Satipatthana is only about samatha? And the answer is no, it does not actually mean that. What it means is that when we practice Satipatthana, we are developing two things, samatha and vipassana. And both samatha and vipassana, when they work together, they take you towards stillness. That is the idea here. So it is not that we are developing one or the other. In fact, they cannot really be separated. Stillness or samatha is just one aspect, the same quality of mind that also allows vipassana. These are qualities of the mind that always go together, and that is the point here. And then they lead to stillness when they work together in this way. So right mindfulness is the development of samatha and vipassana. When these things work together, they lead to stillness, to the samadhi of the path. I'm not sure if coffee leads to samatha, actually. I have some bit. Okay. So let's go a little bit more before we have a short break. I showed you this table before. These are the 37 aids to awakening, the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas in Pali. And this shows you the same three qualities I was just looking at, yeah? Effort, mindfulness, and stillness. And you will see here in these Bodhipakya Dhammas, and remember, this is how the Buddha summarized his teachings. This is the teaching of the Buddha. And if you look at those tables, you see they occur in almost the same sequence, almost everywhere, yeah? So you see energy, mindfulness, stillness, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stillness. The only difference is in the 7 factors of awakening, where mindfulness and energy are turned the other way around. And the reason for that is because energy comes in many different levels, yeah? So energy and effort are not exactly the same thing. So you could have put effort in front of mindfulness and then energy coming afterwards. They are just different degrees of effort. Energy is more kind of a pronounced effort, or it's more a natural effort that happens in the mind automatically once the mind has been kind of empowered, yeah, through the mindfulness practice. So basically the same sequence everywhere, yeah? Energy or effort, then mindfulness, and then stillness last. So this is a consistent way of explaining the Buddhist path in the sutras. Because these are the core aspects of the Buddhist teachings, it is really, this is a very powerful statement as to the importance of this sequence. So when I say that mindfulness comes from right effort and energy, it is not a kind of a one-off, like I've just chosen my favorite sutta and that kind of shows that, yeah? This is what happens sometimes when you have arguments about Buddhism. People use their favorite sutta, that's the only sutta which has this statement, and all the other suttas contradict that. No, this is core, yeah? This is basic teachings. Mindfulness leading to stillness is the same thing, yeah? It's core to the suttas, it's found everywhere, right there at the heart of these teachings. So I'm just kind of making the argument, this is the right way of interpreting the suttas, yeah? Find the core suttas, find the suttas that are repeated again and again and again. That's how you make a good argument from the suttas. You don't take a sutta which is kind of unusual or different to make an argument. You have to use core suttas, then you are on the right track. This was a famous piece of advice given by Venerable Anapanika. Many of you may have heard of him. He was a German monk living in Sri Lanka for a long time. And when Ajahn Brahm went to visit him back in 1992 or something like that, this is one of the pieces of advice he gave to Ajahn Brahm. Yeah? When you want to make an argument from the suttas, then you should always use the majority kind of message of the sutta, not some kind of minority view, which you may find occasionally. Okay. Let us take a short break because a lot of information perhaps. So let's just relax for a few minutes and then come back to this again now. Okay. So, any comments or questions or anything? Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I understood. You said right mindfulness and vipassana combined to give right stillness. Is that? Did I get that right? Or
Right mindfulness and vipassana combined?
Yeah, together to bring right stillness.
What I was saying was that right mindfulness, when you apply that, it gives rise to samatha and vipassana. Yeah, right mindfulness develops both samatha and vipassana together. It doesn't develop just one or the other. They all two always go together, and then those two together give rise to samma samadhi. And it's interesting because it is kind of, usually when we think about vipassana, we think about something which gives rise to wisdom or insight, yeah? But vipassana also gives rise to samadhi because it takes insight to be able to achieve samadhi. Why? Well, because you have to abandon certain things. You have to understand certain things as dukkha. You have to understand the problems of the five senses, the body. Yeah, you have to abandon those to be able to attain samadhi. So you need insight to attain samadhi. Yeah, samadhi and insight, these things always go together. So samatha and vipassana go together. First of all, they take you to samadhi, and then afterwards they go beyond samadhi as well. Yeah. Yes, please.
A question about characteristics of sati and satipatana. It describes free will and sensory desire. Is that shorthand for the other hindrances as well, or is it just those two? And the other part I was wondering is, to what degree is it giving those up? Is it to the point of they're gone, you require a jhanic sort of knockout of them, or is it a sort of step by step?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yes. That's not a complete answer, I recognize that. But it is, the way it looks in the sutras, to me, is that you abandon these things to a large extent, but there are still some refined hindrances left in the mind. Yeah, so and this is what you find, in my opinion, is that the last remnants of the hindrances are actually abandoned through meditation practice. Because the last remnants of the hindrance are actually very refined. Yeah, there might be a little bit of dullness in the mind, there might be a bit of restlessness, a bit of movement going on, and tiny bit of desire as well underlying all of that. Yeah, and so you abandon it for the most part enough to enable you to focus on the meditation object. Yeah, that is the critical part, enough to enable you to focus on the meditation object, and then the rest is abandoned through the process of meditation itself. Roughly, yeah. But actually, we're coming to that now, so it's all kind of, it's all part of this. Ananda.
Ajahn, thanks. That question Prem also raised, that sampajana.
Yeah.
I remember Bhante Sujato translated it as situational awareness.
Yeah.
And I noticed that your translation is full awareness.
Yeah.
I think they are very, especially on that passage, it talks about eating, drinking, urinating, defecating, all that. And so, is there any distinction, or is it better full situational awareness? Combining, so that we don't disagree with anyone.
Yeah, you can say that sure, why not? Yeah. But the idea is situational awareness. It's just that, it's nice because it's whatever situation you're in, you are aware of the purpose of that situation, and for that reason, the kind of situational awareness is probably right. But it's kind of a bit of a mouthful as well. So I thought this full awareness is kind of easier and simpler. But whatever, yeah. Yeah.
Just on that question, at the last retreat, because Ajahn did Sutra as well, when he was doing, I think, Upakalesa Sutra, he touched on these 5 hindrances, being only 2 being, he said you can see to Buddha address Anuruddha. When he addressed Anuruddha, he said he addressed all 3.
Yeah.
So he said similarly, when you say what is it, Kamachanda Vyapada,
Yeah.
I think he said this, it includes all 5, he said.
Okay. Yeah.
So I just remembered when.
Yeah. But I think
you were there.
yeah. I think the thing is, the thing about Satipatthana is that, and I will show this later on, in a sense there is 2 kinds of Satipatthana. One is the Satipatthana you do before you reach Samadhi, another one is the one you do after you reach Samadhi. And the first Satipatthana which you do to reach Samadhi has to do with being able to still the mind. So it includes overcoming any kind of remnant of the hindrance that is there. But the Satipatthana you do after Samadhi, of course, that is purely to do with insight. Yeah? So it depends on what kind of aspect of Satipatthana you're talking about. But what we have seen here is all the Satipatthana that leads to Samadhi. If the hindrances are already overcome, it doesn't seem to be much point in doing Satipatthana before Samadhi. Already overcome, you just go to Samadhi straight away. Yeah? So I would argue that Satipatthana prior to Samadhi does involve removing the last very refined hindrances of the mind. But I've discussed it with Ajahn Brahmali before many times. Yeah? This is kind of one of the recurring discussions at the monastery. And he says that when Ajahn Brahmali talks about the 5 hindrances, he refers to the coarse hindrances of the mind, not the refined ones. So he will argue that still, even when you have removed the 5 hindrances, there are still some refined hindrances left in the mind that you then abandon through watching the breath or whatever, and then you go to Samadhi. So it depends what you mean by the 5 hindrances. So you see, it gets complicated, right? So sometimes we talk past each other because we mean different things by the same word, and it makes it complicated. But the main thing is the process. The process is very simple, and I think everyone agrees on the process. Sometimes words makes things difficult, but the process is you gradually give up defilements, through meditation, through right effort, whatever it is, until you attain Samadhi. That is the process. And I don't think anyone disagrees with that process. Yeah, that's right. So he would exactly. So that those are the refined hindrances, that kind of the last things that you let go of before entering Samadhi. So it's just a different using of words. I don't think there is any essential disagreement in the practice. Yeah, but. It's fun to have a few arguments, yeah? So this is what we have fun at with the monastery. We kind of enjoy a few arguments, and we kind of... Okay, shall we move on? Everyone happy? Yeah? So I'm going to have a look at this in practice, what it means to go from right effort to right mindfulness, to right samadhi, right stillness, yeah? How this actually comes out in the sutras. So... starting with right effort. So this is a classical way that the right effort is described in the sutta. This is the standard formula for sense restraint that you find again and again. And sense restraint is part of right effort. Yeah? Sense restraint basically means not to give rise to strong desires or aversion when we are contacting the world, when we see things, we hear things, etc. So when they see a sight with their eyes, they don't get caught up in the features and details. If the faculty of sight were left unrestrained, bad, unskillful qualities of desire and aversion would overwhelm them. For this reason, they practice restraint, protect the faculty of sight, and achieving its restraint. Yeah, so the restraint here means that you don't allow desire and aversion to arise when you see things. That's basically what this is saying. Yeah, you stop the mind from being overwhelmed. Yeah, so this is what the idea here of sense restraint, and this is right effort. So the avoiding of desire and aversion. Now, desire and aversion, you'll notice these words here, abhijja domanassa in Pali. Yeah, abhijja basically means desire. Or, domanassa means like bad mind, quite literally, domanassa. So it has to do with in other words, aversion here does not mean ill will. Aversion means like they're being repelled by the object. Either you like something or you dislike something. This means like the dislike of something that you see. So you avoid both the dislike and the like. You don't give rise to desire and aversion. If you dislike something, then ill will can come up very quickly afterwards. Yeah, and here you avoid it from overwhelming the mind. Yeah, you stop the mind being overwhelmed by these negative defilements. So this is right effort. So now let's have a look at right mindfulness. It's when you meditate, yeah, this is the same thing we have been seeing all along. You're probably going to be seeing this formula a lot while we do this workshops here, because this is the core formula for Satipatthana practice. It's when you meditate by observing an aspect of the body, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. Yeah, desire and aversion come again. You see, again, abhijja, domanassa, it's exactly the same word you find in right effort. So there's a direct connection here between what you find in right effort with what you find in right mindfulness. In right effort, it said, you do the practice to avoid being overwhelmed by these things. Once you have avoided being overwhelmed, then you come to Satipatthana, and then you are rid of them. You are rid of them because you avoided being overwhelmed under right effort. You can see how one leads to the next one, yeah? And this is what I mean by right effort leading to right mindfulness. You practice right effort to stop being overwhelmed by these qualities. Then when you come to Satipatthana, you are already rid of them because you practiced right effort. Exactly the same word, yeah? Abhijja domanassa in both cases. So you can see how the kind of the evolution happening here. You following me? See what I'm saying? Yeah? So the only way to see this really is to read the text in Pali in the original language, because then you can see, actually here the consistency will also, of translation will also help you, but when you see it in Pali it's much more obvious. And then comes, of course, right stillness, yeah, the next one, samadhi. Having given up these 5 hindrances, they enter and remain in the first absorption, the first jhana. Yeah, so here it is expanded out. It is no longer just desire and aversion. Now it is expanded out to include all the 5 hindrances fully. This is the next step on the path, yeah, one coming after the other one. So first of all, we stop being overwhelmed by desire and aversion. Then, having done that, you are rid of desire and aversion when it comes to right mindfulness. Then the last step is to give up all the 5 hindrances, which then comes in jhana. Yeah, you can see here the stage by progression, one coming after the other. The 5 hindrances here is the kind of the full gamut of defilements in the mind. So to summarize this, yeah, the place of Satipatthana on the path. First of all, you restrain the sense faculties so that desire and aversion do not overwhelm you. Then after getting rid of these things, you practice meditation, Satipatthana. After giving up the 5 hindrances, you attain jhana. This is the gradual movement here of the abandoning of defilements. It's a gradual giving up of defilements, more and more refined, until you attain a jhana state. Okay. So I'm going to look in a little bit more detail about how right effort leads to Satipatthana. I'm just going to have a look at a few ways this is expressed in the suttas. I already looked at one major way right there, but I'm going to look at a couple of more kind of examples from the suttas. And this is one I really like. We just talked about this before, and this was also your question about right view and how that enables Satipatthana practice. When your morality is well purified and your view is correct, you should develop the 4 applications of mindfulness in 3 ways, depending on and grounded on morality. Yeah, so well purified, this means, in other words, you really have purified your morality. It is not a superficial purification. It is not just keeping the 5 precepts. It goes much further than that. And remember, this is one of those very important things, that keeping the 5 precepts, of course, is absolutely necessary for having success on the path of meditation. But it is not enough. Yeah? If you really want to practice this path fully, you have to go beyond the 5 precepts. So good on you, as they say in Australia, for keeping the 5 precepts. But take it further. Yeah, I'm an Aussie now, so I have to kind of use the local lingo, otherwise. So you have to take the purification much deeper than that. You have to you really purify your mind directly, and this is what right effort is about. This is why it's called here well purified, and that's why then again it adds again at the very end, depending on and grounded on morality. That's how you develop your applications of mindfulness. Yeah, in other words, this is really what matters. Right effort leading to Satipatthana. You like that sutta? I like it. I hope you like it too. So, yeah. Satipatthana leading to samadhi. So this is just another way of seeing the next step here. Yeah, the Buddha has described the 4 applications of mindfulness for achieving what is skillful. Kusala, wholesome or skillful. Yeah, so we use Satipatthana to achieve what is skillful. So what do you think is skillful? When you practice Satipatthana, you become rightly stilled. Samma samadhyati, and rightly serene. So in this case, skillful actually means samadhi, samma samadhi. Yeah? You practice the applications of mind, Satipatthana, so as to achieve samadhi. This is what the sutta is saying. This is Digha Nikaya 18. So this is one of the suttas in the Digha Nikaya that talks about the idea of Satipatthana apart from the Maha Satipatthana Sutta. So you can see how these ideas, they are found in many, many different places. They're found both in the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, aids to awakening, but they're also found in individual suttas in many different places. Okay, so now I have looked at the structure of the path, how Satipatthana is fit in between right effort and right samadhi. And now I want to look at a bit more detail about the purpose of Satipatthana. So we already know that the purpose is to achieve samadhi, but of course, samadhi, to achieve samadhi, there are many sub-purposes on the path, leading towards samadhi. And I want to look at some of those sub-purposes that are part of the process of meditation. Meditation is a process, and there's many levels to go through before you achieve samadhi. All of these are purposes of this particular practice. So, first of all, removes the refined defilements. We have already looked at that a little bit. I'm going to have a look at this in a little bit more in a second. It gives rise to joy. This is kind of interesting. Satipatthana gives rise to joy, because normally, very commonly, Satipatthana is presented as an insight practice, and joy is sometimes discouraged even in the practice of Satipatthana. But actually, if you practice Satipatthana in the right way, joy is part of Satipatthana practice. This is kind of very counter to how we normally think about these things. It stills the mind. This is also the purpose of Satipatthana, stilling the mind. This is more directly related to samadhi, how it takes you to samadhi. So this, arguably, you can argue, is maybe 3 of the main areas of Satipatthana practice, what it does. And is there more? Anything else? Maybe. We shall find out. I will tell you in a second if there is more, but for now, let's just focus on the first 3 ones first of all. So it removes the refined defilements. So here are some examples in the suttas for how this works. In the same way, a noble disciple has these 4 applications of mindfulness, the 4 Satipatthana, as tethers of the mind, so as to subdue behaviors of the lay life, memories and thoughts of the lay life, the stress, weariness and fever of the lay life, to end the cycle of suffering and to realize extinguishment. So here it talks about lay life. This is like ordinary lay life. Lay life can be many different things depending on how you live it. But usually lay life, and sometimes monastic life, it has a lot of attachments, yeah? Especially if you're not on the spiritual path at all. There's lots of attachments there, which leads to all kind of desires and confusions and problems. So what this really is referring to, these memories and thoughts, the stress, weariness and fever of the lay life, refers to these attachments and these desires and aversions that arise as a consequence of that. And you use the 4 applications of mindfulness to overcome that. Yeah? This is just another way of saying that you overcome the refined defilements of the mind through the applications of mindfulness. This also goes further. It also says that it leads to the end of the cycle of suffering, but we'll come back to that later on. This is from the Danta Bhumi Sutta, Majimanika 125, the level of the tamed. It's a very nice sutta, by the way. Lots of nice suttas. Every sutta is nice. More removal of defilements. An astute, competent, skillful monastic. This is very monastic kind of related, but it relates to everyone. Yeah, it really depends on how you live your life. Meditates by observing an aspect of the body, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. So this is the standard Satipatana formula. Yeah, you probably recognize it by now. And while you do that, what happens? Well, this is what happens. As they meditate, observing an aspect of the body, their corruptions are given up. And the word for corruptions here is upakilesa. Yeah? So this ties straight back to the Upakilesa Sutta, which talks about the refined defilements of the mind, which is very interesting. So here, given up does not mean final giving up. It means like the temporary giving up to enable you to enter a jhana state. Yeah? This sutta continues after this, actually with the entry into jhana afterwards. I haven't included it here, but it shows you, again, it's about removing defilements of the mind. Okay, Satipatthana gives rise to joy. This, in a sense, is perhaps more interesting because it might be more controversial. Yeah. So, what is the evidence for that? Well, first of all, joy and bliss are mentioned in a number of places in the Satipatthana Sutta. They are directly part of Satipatthana practice. Yeah, the joy and bliss, which are then contemplated and used in the right way, and they are found everywhere in the Satipatthana Sutta. Satipatthana Sutta has 4 contemplations. We've just been talking about it: body, feelings, mind, and mental qualities. In the feelings, you have all kinds of feelings that have to do with this. You have Niramisa Sukha. Niramisa Sukha literally means, yeah? So you see, I'm glad I'm saying it in Pali so you can also understand this talat. That's good. So Niramisa Sukha is all about the joy and the bliss of the jhanas and the samadhi. That's what it's about. And it's right there in the feelings. So this is part of what you develop in the Satipatthana Sutta. Then you go to the Chitta Anupassana, the contemplation of the mind, and it talks about things like my mind is getting a bit fuzzy now, but talks about things like the Apamana Chitta, the Apamana, which is like the boundless mind. It talks about the Samahita Chitta, the mind which is still and concentrated. It talks about... sorry? Sure, but now I want to focus on the kind of good qualities, the good ones. Yeah. And all of these things are terms for samadhi, implying joy and happiness. In the last one, the Dhammanupassana, it talks specifically about the bojjhangas. The bojjhangas are the 7 factors of awakening. Yeah? And the 7 factors of awakening are all about, they're all about joy, piti. They are about passaddhi, tranquility. And these are all the pleasurable aspects of the path. Yeah? So the Satipatthana Sutta itself is full of these qualities, and so they are necessarily a part of Satipatthana practice. Second one, we have the mindfulness of breathing, Anapana Sutta, Majimanika 118. And if you read the Anapana Sutta, again, it is full of joy and bliss throughout that sutta. This is one of those beautiful things about some of these suttas. When you read them, it is just so attractive. Yeah, it's very attractive because all of these suttas show you the prominence of happiness on the Buddhist path. The Buddhist path is all about happiness. That's kind of the whole purpose of the path. And that is, in a sense, why it is so sad that sometimes you learn meditation and you're told that, don't worry about the happiness and bliss. No, worry about it. Don't worry about it, but enjoy it. This is part of the path. It's a fundamental aspect of the path. And I'm so glad I had Ajahn Brahmali as my teacher to point this out to me. Because once you know that and you start reading the suttas with that at the back of your mind, you see it everywhere. Yeah, it is so prominent in the suttas. Especially in the Anapanasati Sutta, it's everywhere. Now, the Anapanasati Sutta is the primary way of developing Satipatana. This is how you develop it, through Anapanasati. So if Anapanasati is full of joy and bliss, so is Satipatana, because this is how you develop the Satipatanas. Here is one more, just to for the sake of completion, as they say. So again, you meditate observing an aspect of the body, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. So Satipatthana. When this stillness, this samadhi, is well developed and cultivated in this way, you should develop it with joy. You should develop it with bliss. Joy, piti, bliss, sukha. These are the translations used here. So, in other words, you should develop the Satipatthanas with joy and with bliss. You will notice here, very interesting, the Satipatthana is called this stillness, this kind of samadhi. Yeah? Kind of fascinating. You don't normally hear about Satipatthana talked about in this way, but here it is called a kind of samadhi itself, the practice of Satipatthana. Are you still hanging in there, everyone? You all right? Yeah? Okay, marvelous. I'm very impressed with you because I'm barely hanging there myself, but so let's see what happens. Exalted mind is one of them, exactly. Yeah, liberated mind, another one, by the way. You are definitely hanging in there, yeah. Okay, excellent. Okay. Satipatthana stills the mind. This is what Satipatthana brings it to samadhi. Yeah. So again, this is the same sutta we looked at before. An astute, competent, skillful monastic meditates by observing an aspect of the body, and then feeling, and then mind, and then mental qualities. Keen, aware, and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. As they meditate observing an aspect of the body, feeling, mind, qualities of mind, their mind enters samadhi. The famous Cook Sutta, the Suddha Sutta, Satipatthana Samyutta number 8, if you want to look it up. Next one, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stillness. These things are included in the category of stillness, samadhi. From Majimanika 44, the Chula Vidalla Sutta. Yeah, right mindfulness is part of samadhi, part of the category of samadhi. Why? Well, because these are the qualities that lead you to samadhi eventually. And also right effort here as well. This is the development of mind that culminates in samadhi. Interesting, right? It's part of samadhi. I'm really hammering it home now in case there's any doubt. I was really bang, sledgehammer. Right, that categorization, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it's interesting because sometimes it is defined, these things are put together in different ways. Sometimes right effort is said to be part of sila. Here it is said to be part of samadhi. But sometimes also part of sila. Depending on the sutta, there's slight variation here. Because this is not mathematics. It is more like different angles to see the same point, really. That's really what it's about. It's more like art. It's a mixture of science and arts, I would say. Yeah, it's kind of yeah. Okay, I hope you forgive my sledgehammer approach. I'm really kind of bang. Okay, what's the next stroke of the sledgehammer? Is this one here? Satipatthana stills the mind. The 4 applications of mindfulness are the foundations of stillness. Yeah, another nail in the proverbial coffin. And another one, the vital conditions and supports of noble samadhi are the first 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and right mindfulness. These are the conditions and support of noble samadhi. Okay, well there you are, exactly, so there you are, yeah. Now you can go back to him and tell him. So, anything else? This was a question I had before. This is good, actually, we're coming to the end, this is perfect timing here. So is there anything else? And one of the things which is interesting in the sutta is that when you read the description of Satipatthana, it looks like it takes you all the way to the end of the path, yeah? So this is the standard description. The 4 Satipatthanas is the path to purify sentient beings, to get past sorrow and crying, to make an end of pain and sadness, to end the cycle of suffering, and to realize extinguishment. Extinguishment here is a translation of Nibbana, which we always translate these days, rather than just having Nibbana there. So when you look at this, yeah, you get the feeling that it is not just about taking you to samadhi, but that there is more to Satipatthana. Otherwise, it wouldn't take you all the way to Nibbana itself. So we need to somehow explain this. How do we fit this into the idea that Satipatthana normally leads to samadhi? This is the kind of the question that we need to ask now. And there's 2 ways of answering this question. And the first way is to say that all of these qualities, they lead to Nibbana in the sense that they are moving in that direction. Yeah? And you find this kind of statement that you see here, leading to extinguishment, you find that used in the sutta as in many different contexts. And one of the contexts is the 6 Anuseties, the 6 Anuseties, which are the 6 recollections. They are said also to lead to extinguishment, lead to Nibbana in the same way. But of course, they're not enough in their own right. It's not enough just to recall your generosity and kindness. It's not enough to go all the way to Nibbana, but it is an important part of that path. It leads in that direction. So one way of thinking about this statement is to think that this is a path that leads there. It doesn't necessarily mean that it goes all the way to the destination point. Another way of thinking about this is to understand, as I mentioned before, Satipatthana in a sense to be twofold. There's the first aspect of Satipatthana, which is the main one, and that is Satipatthana leading to samadhi. This is the main purpose. This is how it is described throughout the suttas. But then there is a second aspect of Satipatthana, which is what happens after samadhi. Yeah? And that is when Satipatthana has the ability to lead to profound insight on the path. That is when it leads to Nibbana. So in a sense, you can divide Satipatthana up. This is one way of thinking about it. Yeah? There's different ways of thinking about it. You can divide it up into these 2 aspects, before samadhi and after samadhi, pre-samadhi and post-samadhi, if you like. Yeah? And, okay, so let's just schematize this a little bit. Yeah? So we have this. You can find, in fact, this particular way of looking at it can, in a sense, be found on the 10-fold path. The 10-fold path is the 8-fold path plus 2 more factors. Yeah? So we have the first 6 factors going to right effort. Then from right effort, we have right mindfulness and right stillness, as we have seen all along. And then from right stillness, you have right knowledge, samma jnana. Yeah, which is kind of interesting. So once you have samma samadhi, what comes from samma samadhi is right knowledge, right understanding. This is very similar to what we see in other suttas, where we say that samma samadhi leads to yathabhuta jnanadassana. Yeah? Same kind of idea. Here it is called samma jnana. And you could say that samma jnana is basically the application of Satipatthana after samadhi. when you apply Satipatthana after samadhi, it leads to right knowledge. This is what you find here. And that right knowledge is then what leads to right freedom. Yeah, right freedom being the liberation from from suffering. And you can schematize this in this way. Yeah, 2 levels of Satipatthana. First of all, you practice Satipatthana in the ordinary way, mindfulness of breathing, whatever. That gives rise to samadhi, the stillness of the mind, yeah, the jhanas, all of these beautiful things. And that in turn leads to another kind of Satipatthana that is more profound, that is the same as Samma Jnana, the right knowledge on the path. And then that leads to Samma Vimutti at the very end. So this is interesting because what it means is that we need to, if we think about Satipatthana as going all the way to the very end of the path, we need to be very careful to distinguish what we mean. Do we mean pre-samadhi Satipatthana or post-samadhi Satipatthana? If we're talking about pre-samadhi Satipatthana, before we reach samadhi, we need to understand what it is that leads to samadhi. Yeah? How do we get to samadhi? That becomes the kind of paramount thing. We should not look for deep insights into the nature of reality before samadhi, because it is impossible before you have samadhi. You have to wait for samadhi. So we should ask ourselves the question, how do I get to samadhi? What are the defilements still remaining in my mind? What are the kind of preliminary vipassana I need or samatha I need to get to samadhi? Once we have samadhi, then Satipatthana becomes a tool for achieving awakening itself. That is where you get real insight. That is where you get real understanding. Yeah? And when you think about Satipatthana in this way, I think you have a tool, a way of thinking about it, which is very useful. If you get it the wrong way, if we try to gain deep insight into the reality before samadhi, we're wasting our time because it is impossible. Samadhi is the upanisa. Samadhi is the necessary condition for yata bhuta nanadasana. You need stillness of the mind to be able to see things according to reality. This is one of the kind of fundamental things you see in the suttas again and again and again. So you have to get the sequence right. So Satipatthana, first of all, leads to samadhi. And then, once you have samadhi, then it will lead to liberation. And you need to remember that kind of sequence in the right way. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. So, I think that is it. What comes next? Oh! Yeah. So I can't show you that one. That's kind of a... It's copyrighted. Yeah, it probably is, actually. So we should probably delete that before we post it anywhere. So, I think I have kind of exhausted my ability to speak much more. So I would like to, does anyone have any last comments or questions? I'm not sure if I answered your question properly. Are you okay? Okay, good. I'm glad you are here. Eddie, okay, fine, go ahead.
Ajahn Brahmali, thank you so much for all this. I learned a lot, Yeah. Ajahn Brahmali and everybody, I've been practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness for a long time now without realizing that it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And without realizing, all this, Yeah. I practice that to help me overcome my difficulty, my problems, and it works wonders for me, Okay, yeah. When I have a problem, I go straight to it. Is that right? Whenever there's a disturbing feeling that comes to me, So what I do is the 4 foundations. First of all, what I do is I'll calm myself down, which I can now. I calm myself down, and then I look into, why does this feeling come, this feeling? Yeah, and then, there's always some things in it, all right? Yeah, and it's my mind holding, playing with it thing, Once I know this, I feel I'm in control of the situation. And then I apply all this, the Buddha's, antidotes to overcome, That's my layman's way of doing it, not achieving the higher states. Is that right? Can I do this like that?
Great, marvelous, yeah. Oh. Excellent, yeah. Well done, Eddie.
Thank you. I learned more.
But you missed out on one thing. You missed out on the first part earlier this afternoon, because you weren't here in the beginning, right?
So one thing I was a bit...
One thing I taught them is 4 foundations of mindfulness, the wrong translation. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So
yeah,
4
but then what I mean is whatever
four
words
applications
they
of
use
mindfulness,
or what, it's the 4 things, you know, the feeling, the thought, the thinking, the effect, you know, and then the situation, and then I don't even do the meditation, you know, because I feel I can, maybe from my previous life condition, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just went straight to it, and it helps me a lot.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah,
Thank
excellent,
you.
marvelous. Okay. We've got 5 minutes left. Yes, Prem, please. Yeah.
As you said, the 4 foundations, it doesn't make sense. 4 focuses do make sense.
Yeah.
You are focusing on the body, various aspects of the body. You are focusing on the mind, various aspects and various insights, etc. of the mind. So I think focusing makes real sense to me. I don't know.
Good. Yeah, no, I agree. Focuses, or I like applications. You're applying mindfulness, but yeah, same thing. Yeah. Good. Anyone else? Please, yeah.
For right stillness, even the first jhana, is that right stillness?
Yes, that's how it's defined in the sutras, right stillness.
4 jhanas?
4 jhanas, yeah.
Including the first jhana.
Yeah, yeah. We will, the plan is, the long-term plan, which of course long-term plans never usually work out, but the long-term plan, according to our famous workshop organizer, Lehar, is that we eventually will come to Samma Samadhi and right stillness as well. Yeah, if we are still alive, we will get to that one. That's uncertain, of course, but down the track, yeah. Yeah, please, yeah.
What I learned today, after being a Buddhist for 20 years, is I thought practicing mindfulness would give me more mindfulness. Well, I learned today, thank you so much, that I need to improve my, reduce my defilements, ill will, and so on, to actually become more mindful, and that's been a blocker, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
so I'm going to
Yeah.
do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, it's interesting how this is, I think, often a big misunderstanding in the Buddhist world. So I'm very glad that that was helpful because, yeah. And this is the advantage of reading the sutras. Yeah, sometimes some simple things like that become so obvious when you read the sutras. It's actually very obvious in the sutras. It's just that we are used to kind of hearing the Dhamma without really going to the source very often, and then we miss out on some of the most basic and most important messages in the sutras. Yeah. Okay, everyone happy? Anyone unhappy? No one unhappy. It's always a win-win if you ask. Nobody's going to say anyway they're unhappy, so it's always a win to ask that question. Okay, everyone, so let's call it a day, and let's just finish off by paying respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha.